Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'd like to give some honest thoughts and opinions on the Ends deck. So that's basically just Zoroark EX because you can't really build an Ends deck that's not built around Zoroark. Like, Zoroark is definitely the main piece in this deck. So before we start, the Ends deck looks decent overall, I'd say, personally. Not too powerful, but not, obviously complete rubbish. Otherwise, what would be the point in doing this video? But yeah, not too powerful, like not S tier, I don't think, sadly, but not rubbish. The deck is based around Zoroark EX's copying other Ends Pokemon's attacks, which is a very wordy way of saying you use Night Joker, and then you just choose one of your benched Ends Pokemon's attacks, and that's the deck in a nutshell. The deck more or less builds itself as a result, but you are limited with bench space. So one of the great things about the owner's decks are that you can pretty much just get most of it from one set, Journey Together, which is great, of course. But in particular, the Ends deck especially, you are quite limited in what you can bench, because ideally, Ends RKX is also your draw engine, not just your main attacker. So you might want 3 or 4 of them in play, for example. So yeah, bench space is going to be a bit limited. The deck also looks vulnerable to Zacian EX plays to snipe Zoras before you can evolve them. So, Zacian can do at least, well, it can do 30 damage base, 60 with a choice band that it has, 90 with a Snorlax, 120 with a Stadium, I think. So, yeah, Zacian going second is quite scary. But aside from those sort of like very niche spread decks, your Zoras should be fine most of the time. Also, Budew is like weirdly effective against this deck, which is not mentioned here, but Budew will do 20 damage to Zoro and prevent you from playing items, which can be very irritating. So yeah, you're going to have to play some supporters to try and like get around Budew, I think. But yeah, the main pie slices we've got here are a 4/4 line of Zoroark. I would say, like, just with the tradability being so strong, you kind of just want to stack a bunch of these guys in play. And of course, it's your main attacker, so 4 copies seems reasonable. 2/2 line of Darmanitan, I'm firmly in the camp now, I should say, of believing that Darmanitan is the best attacker in the deck, really. Backdraft is decent sometimes, especially against the likes of Ceruledge, but the Dormant Eye Cannon is very powerful, especially if you can get it turn 2. So what you ideally want to do is just set up a Darmanitan on the bench for the second turn of the game, do 90 damage, discard 2 Dark Energy, and then do 90 damage snipe to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, which effectively will hopefully, well, net you 2 prizes. Fingers crossed. Of course, this will not happen, all the time, but sometimes it will get you 2 prizes, especially against evolving decks. So, that's honestly really solid to lead the game. And all of a sudden, that puts a lot more pressure on your opponent to get back into the game because you just dropped it down to 4 prize cards. So, yeah, Ends Darmanitan, I think, is very important. So, either a 2/2 line, I think, maybe a 3/2. You could play a 1/1 if you really want to get techie with other stuff, but honestly, considering your options right now at least, I think Ends Darmanitan is definitely a 2/2 in the deck. Also, we've got this Ends Castle, which I've put down here as a 2 copy of / 3 copies of, maybe. To be honest, it's just like a permanent switch in play for all of your Ends Pokemon, which is great. It also means that you don't really have to run other Pokemon if you don't want to. So, like, you don't really have to run Pheasantipity in this deck, for example, if you don't want to. So you could just run, like, Budew, which already has free retreat, and then just a bunch of Ends stuff. And then Ends Castle just means your opponent can't just, like, boss Ends Darmanitan and stall it in the active spot. Because one thing I have noticed with the Zacian deck is that Snorlax is a very beefy boy. It has a lot of HP, but it also has a very high retreat cost. So I think store strategies will be quite good against the Zacian deck. So at least, it'll force them to play a lot of switches, basically. So yeah, I do think Ends Castle is pretty good. Also just a natural counter to the Postwick Stadium and Lavencia. But yeah, Ends PP up. Yeah, that's probably not going to be the name of the card when it makes its way into English. But yeah, this is a pretty good card. Attach a base Genji card from your discard pile to one of your benched Ends Pokemon. Just means that after you use Dormant Cannon, you can basically just reattach energy to your bench Zoroarks and then free retreat with Ends Castle. And that's kind of like the deck they're pushing. There's obviously a bit more to it, and we'll go through it in the video. But Ends PP up, I still think, is a 4 of in the deck. Also, it has the natural synergy with Trade, so you can just discard a basic energy, draw 2 cards, and then reattach it with Ends PP up. And lastly, it doesn't specify basic or evolution. It literally just says benched Ends. So if you want, you really can just start evolving Zoroarks and things, and then play Ends PP up. So it's a very, very flexible, very, very strong item card. Definitely a 4 of. So yeah, any other attackers? Well, we've got a Joltik, a Reshiram, and a Sigilyph. I'm personally still not 100% sold on Joltik, but 30 damage plus Polarises that you can like randomly toss out if you can discard a tool card can be really strong, to be honest. Like, your opponent will have to run, switches, they'll have to find switches, or they'll have to evolve. But of course, if they can't evolve at that point, you just do not attack with Joltik, basically. But like, I do think this is quite strong in some situations, right? You can paralyze a Zacian, get rid of their choice band, decent potentially. Like, I wouldn't run more than one of it because, of course, it's still very niche and situational. But in the times it works, it could be very strong. So especially in the early game when your opponent has to like sift through their deck trying to find switches. So yeah, I do quite like Ends Joltik. But yeah, we've got Ends Reshiram, which I'm still, again, very split down the middle on whether or not this card is very good or not. But I would still run at least one copy to have access to the powerful Rage attack, which does 20 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. And then Virtuous Flame is actually the highest damage you can throw out with this deck, assuming Backdraft isn't going to do a lot of damage. But yeah, Virtuous Flame does 170, which is honestly pretty solid, lets you two-shot anything, and it's basically just a good follow-up after using Dormant Eye Cannon, Backdraft, or Powerful Rage, or sometimes even Crackling Short, potentially. But, typically Virtuous Flame is a good punch move if you just have nothing else to copy that's good. So yeah, Virtuous Flame, quite a nice move. And then End Sigilyph, again, I personally wouldn't run more than one copy of this card, but still pretty good with Victory Symbol. If you use this attack when you have one prize card left, you win the game. So you can basically play a match of Pokemon as if you have 5 prize cards. So if you take 2 with Darmanian, then maybe another 2 with Zoroark, or maybe, you play Darmanian, I guess, you play 2 Darmanian, you take 4 prize cards that way, then maybe take one more prize card with something like Virtuous Flame or Powerful Rage even, and then you can just end Sigilyph, use Victory Symbol to win the game. You'll never attack with Sigilyph itself, but it doesn't matter because you can just have to bench it, and then Zoroark will copy it. So yeah, pretty decent, definitely a nice one-off. And we get to Purrloin here, which, to be honest, I don't think is very good, sadly. I think this is kind of like a 4 out of 10 on the option scale for Embers. But yeah, ends Purrloin, not the best option, but Pilfer can be good. 30 damage, your opponent reveals their hand, put a card there you find there on the bottom of their deck. So you don't get to discard it, which is a bit rough. Again, weakness to grass as well, actually, worth mentioning because you're weak to Budew. But yeah, Pilfer is a bit weak. I do think it's good if you can build around it with like Unfair Stamp and Xerasic, but realistically, unless you're building around this, I don't think it's a good tech option. Like, I think Joltik's going to come up way more often than Ends Purrloin's ever going to be worth it. And typically, even Darmuka can do 50 damage, at least a copy, so Pilfer only doing 30 doesn't really fulfill any kind of role. So unless you're running Unfair Stamp in your list and Xerasic, I don't think Purrloin is going to come up too much, sadly. But could be wrong. Then we have the best A-Spec choice for this deck. Personally, I do think Hyperoma is still the best A-Spec choice for this deck. Search your deck for 3 Stage 1 Pokemon, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So very simply, you get a Darmanian and 2 Zoroark EX. Also, you're kind of looking to do this turn 2, so hopefully you can avoid the Budew Plague. So yeah, that's another thing to bear in mind. So TM Evolution might, fulfill your role sometimes. But yeah, Precious Trolley is another really solid option just because Darmuka and Reshiram are not within Poffin range. So having Precious Trolley is a really nice option, to be honest. So if your opponent goes first, and even if they start with Budew, right, they go first, then you go second, you can still get the Precious Trolley off and get like 5 Pokemon on the board. So that's honestly sounds like a really good option. Hero's Cape is a wee bit weird, but it will give a Zoroark 380 HP. So you're basically just saying to a Raging Bolt player, either want to KO my Zoroark, or I'm going to want to KO you back with a Reshiram's powerful Rage attack. Now, of course, they could just discard 1 energy and do 70 damage, and then one-shot you the next turn, which gets a bit awkward. But I still think Hero's Cape does have some niche uses for powering up powerful Rage, but I think it's a bit easier to play around. Then we have Prime Capture, which just has synergy with End's PB up, because it means you can promote whatever you want, really, with End's Castle in play. Then you can End's PB up to a benched Zoroark, and then Prime Catcher, gust whatever you want, and KO it. So yeah, could be decent for a Prime Catcher play. But yeah, any other options really. Got Professor Turo's Scenario just to remove a useless Pokemon that you don't want to copy anymore. So like that Joltik that we mentioned earlier is a good example. Night Stretcher is honestly a really nice option here as well. Just gives you the flexibility to discard Pokemon in the early game like Sigilyph and Joltik, just to retrieve them later on with Night Stretcher. Also, if you want to discard a Zoroark earlier on, for example, or you have to, then you can easily get it back with Night Stretcher. So very, very good item card. Then probably the best supporter this deck has access to really is Cypher Maniac, allowing you to search your deck for any 2 cards that you want from your deck and put them on top of it. So of course you can just trade straight into those cards. So things like Counter Capture is going to be great here. Night Stretcher, of course, we just mentioned. Ends PP up is another great one. So of course, Cypher Maniac's very, very strong card. Then Jock is a bit of a strange one, but I just thought I'd throw it in here, allowing you to search your deck for up to 2 evolution Pokemon. You can find 2 Zoroarks, or maybe either Diamantian and a Zoroark. Could be nice, very flexible. But again, not really a supporter I would run maybe more than one of. Although you could really. You could use like a heavy Jock style build, I guess, if you really wanted to, with like Clavel and things. But it seems a bit strange, but maybe worth it, actually, if there is a buddy format in the future. But any more choices aside from that? We do have Exchange Ticket and Brock Scouting coming and joining together. Exchange Ticket just means that you don't have to rely on like good prizes. So what I mean by that is if you have like a bunch of PP ups prized or a bunch of Zoroarks prized, you can at least exchange ticket and have a chance of getting them back into the game. So that's a nice option. And then Brock Scouting can find 2 basics at any HP, which is good for Darmaka. But also you can find an evolution Pokemon, so you can just get a Zoroark straight out the deck, which is nice, or discard it with trade. So that's another great thing about having the trade engine, is it just means you can run these niche techs you can sort of just dump whenever you want. So if Brock Scouting is just not good enough to find evolution Pokemon, but it's good for basics, you can of course just discard it with ends trade, and that's fine. So yeah, just trade away the Jock, trade away the scenario, trade away the scouting. It works out quite nicely. Then we have Janane's Secret Art. If you fancy some more energy acceleration, could be a nice one-off in some situations when, if you whiff a manual attachment or something, because let's face it, that is going to happen to us eventually. But yeah, Janane's Secret Art, honestly not that bad of a card. It does poison, which kind of sucks a bit if you've got a Zoroark in the active. However, if you want to use it on a Zoro, that's obviously fine, because then Zoroark will evolve and remove the poison. So, it works out nicely in the end if you do it that way. But yeah, Janane's Secret Art could be good just for getting some energy on the board. But yeah, thanks for watching. And Zoroark does, to be honest, look to be the most enjoyable out of the decks for me, at least personally. But I'm up for doing every trainer's Pokemon in the series in this way. So, let me know which Pokemon you'd like to see next, or which trainer I should specify. And yeah, thank you for watching.